Ethan Carter took pride in being both a hardworking electrician and a caring husband. After completing his electrician training, he devoted himself fully to his job, quickly becoming one of the most reliable employees at Harris Electric. Despite long hours, Ethan always made time for his wife, Laura. On the surface, their 8-year marriage appeared solid, but in recent weeks, subtle changes in Laura's behavior left him feeling uneasy. Laura, an ambitious sociology professor, was always organized and driven. When she received an invitation to attend seminars in Columbus, she eagerly accepted. Ethan, wanting to be supportive, offered to join her, but she quickly dismissed the idea, insisting it was a professional trip and reminding him of their upcoming spring break vacation. Her firm stance bothered Ethan, though he chose to trust her judgment. On Wednesday evening, Ethan arrived home around 6 p.m., exhausted from a long day. He had stayed late to finish a complex wiring job, completing it ahead of schedule but leaving him sore and drained. The quiet of the house served as a stark reminder that Laura had already left for her 3-day trip. Though Ethan had offered to accompany her, she had urged him to stay behind, citing their cruise as a future opportunity to relax together. The cruise tickets on the sideboard were a constant reminder of their upcoming getaway, but they didn't do much to ease his current unease. Noticing that Laura hadn't sent a message to confirm her safe arrival, Ethan felt slightly concerned. Deciding not to wait any longer, he picked up the phone and called her. After 2 rings, she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "I was just about to call you, Ethan. You must be reading my mind," she said, laughter in her tone. There was a faint hum of background noise, which made sense if she was still in the hotel lobby. "You know I'm always reading your mind," Ethan joked lightly. "How was the drive?" "Smooth sailing, thanks to the directions you printed. Traffic was light, and I found the Sheraton without a problem," she said. Ethan smiled but couldn't shake a lingering discomfort. "I even thought about asking for time off to come with you," he teased. "No, you're not coming here," she replied quickly, her tone sharper than usual before softening. "We agreed to wait until spring break for a trip, remember?" "Relax, Laura. I was just kidding. I didn't actually ask my boss." "I'll stay put and behave," Ethan said, though her abrupt reaction troubled him. "I'm glad to hear that," she responded, sounding relieved. "This week is packed with seminars anyway. I wouldn't have much time for you." After a short pause, she added, "By the way, can you check if my travel bag with the sewing kit and lint brush is in the bedroom? I couldn't find it before I left." "Sure. Give me a second," Ethan said, heading toward their bedroom. He spotted the bag on the dresser, picked up the portable phone, and returned. "Found it. It's on the dresser. Thank goodness. I didn't want to rummage through the garage or check the car," Laura said. "If I can't find what I need, I'll just grab something from the hotel store. Anyway, I have to go. I'm third in line at the front desk. I won't have much time to call this week, but I'll be home by Saturday evening." "That's fine, honey. Call if you can." "I'll see you Saturday night," Ethan replied. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, they hung up. Despite the light-hearted conversation, her reaction to his joke stuck in his mind. For weeks now, Ethan had been noticing small but significant changes in Laura's behavior. Sometimes she seemed distant, while at other times she acted overly accommodating. Even when they initially discussed him joining her on this trip, she hadn't seemed opposed, but her attitude shifted quickly. Though he didn't want to dwell on negative thoughts, something about the situation didn't sit right with him. Realizing he was hungry, Ethan decided to order a pizza. With about 40 minutes to wait for delivery, he headed upstairs, took a quick shower, and changed into comfortable jeans and a t-shirt. Back in the kitchen, he opened a beer and settled at the table to relax while waiting for his food. Normally, Laura would have commented on his unhealthy choice, but tonight, he didn't have to worry about her disapproval. After all, his job kept him in good shape, and he figured the leftovers would make an easy lunch at work the next day. Later, as he watched the news, his mind kept drifting back to Laura's recent behavior. Over the past couple of months, something had clearly shifted in her attitude toward him, and her strong refusal to let him join her on this trip gnawed at him. At 35, Laura was a striking woman with long, dark hair and captivating eyes. Recently, she had started a new job as a junior faculty member at the local college, a role she was proud of. At the beginning of the semester, She frequently mentioned her teaching assistant, Derek, but Ethan noticed she hadn't brought him up in quite some time. In mid-November, Laura first mentioned the seminar she wanted to attend during the break between semesters. Initially, she was fine with Ethan tagging along, but within a couple of weeks, she became increasingly insistent on attending alone, suggesting they plan a spring break trip together instead. Though reluctant, Ethan agreed to her decision, sensing her determination. During the holidays, the topic of the seminars didn't come up often. They enjoyed Christmas with family and friends, and for a while, Ethan forgot about the trip. Still, he remembered Laura receiving registration materials in large envelopes, which she promptly sorted and mailed back. Her excitement was evident. She even began packing several days before New Year's, which was typical of her organized nature. Around 8 p.m., Ethan returned to the bedroom intending to read a book he had left on the nightstand. While tidying up, he decided to put away the bag Laura had asked about earlier and noticed it sitting on top of something unusual, her diary. Ethan rarely saw her diary since she usually kept it hidden or in her briefcase. Early in their marriage, Laura had made it clear that her diary was private, and the topic had never come up again. He assumed she wrote in it while at college or during his work hours. Curiosity got the better of him. For the first time, he picked up the small red leather-bound diary with a brass lock, wondering if it could offer any insight into her recent strange behavior. Instead of putting it back, Ethan took it to the kitchen where the lighting was better and examined the lock. He quickly noticed that only about a third of the pages had been written on. It seemed odd. Surely 8 years' worth of entries wouldn't fit in just a third of one diary. He figured Laura must have older journals tucked away somewhere. Acting on instinct, Ethan went upstairs to check her closet, a space he had never invaded before. After a brief search, he found a shoebox on the top shelf containing a neat stack of 6 more red leather diaries. He brought them down to the kitchen for a closer look. Each diary was identical, except for a small white circle on the spine numbered 1 through 6. The current diary had no number. He also noticed the name Coons embossed on the back of each book, recognizing it as a local specialty store. The locks on all the diaries appeared identical, leading Ethan to wonder if they shared the same key. Unsure how else to proceed without damaging the locks, he decided to call Coons to see if they still sold the same kind of diaries. A young woman on the phone confirmed they had 2 in stock and that the store would be open until 10 p.m. Without hesitation, Ethan decided to buy one, hoping the key would work on Laura's diaries. Picking the locks was risky. If he ruined them, Laura would never forgive him. Half an hour later, Ethan was driving home with a brand new red leather diary and its key in his bag. The purchase had cost him nearly $60, but he didn't mind if it could help him understand what was bothering Laura. If everything turned out to be harmless, he figured he could always gift her the new diary later. He tried to focus on logical explanations, wondering if she was hiding something like an illness. She had done that once before when she was awaiting test results. Another possibility was work-related stress or conflicts she preferred to handle privately. Yet, despite his attempts to reason through it, Ethan couldn't ignore the nagging fear that perhaps Laura was hiding something more personal, something darker. Was she having an affair? He didn't want to admit it, even to himself, and tried to focus on other explanations instead. Ethan and Laura had always been somewhat of an unusual couple. He was slightly shorter, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a muscular build, while Laura was tall, slender, and striking, with long dark hair and intense dark eyes. They had met in school and reconnected years later at a friend's party. They married a month after she graduated, starting their life in a small house before eventually upgrading to a larger one, with plans to start a family in the near future. When Ethan got home, he wasn't entirely sure if the key would fit the locks on Laura's diaries. He found it in a small brown envelope tucked inside the new diary's packaging. The tiny key seemed delicate, and he briefly considered that he should have asked the store clerk if all locks were universal. He decided that if the key didn't fit, he would give up. He wasn't about to waste time searching for another key. 5 minutes later, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with the stack of journals in front of him and a soda can in hand. He stared at Laura's most recent diary, holding the small key nervously. He knew that if the key fit, he would be crossing a line from which there was no turning back. For a moment, he hesitated, feeling the weight of potential betrayal, But concern for Laura's well-being and nagging doubts about her behavior ultimately pushed him forward. He inserted the key. It fit perfectly. As he opened the diary and began reading the latest entry, his face turned pale and his eyes welled up. Shocked by what he had read, Ethan stood, walked to the sink, and squeezed the soda can until it overflowed, spilling onto his hand. Realizing his hand was sticky, he washed it, then carried the stack of journals and the key to the living room. He placed them on the nightstand, turned on a lamp, and settled into his chair, determined to find out what had gone wrong. He opened the first page of the current diary, dated early June, over 6 months ago. The summer entries described Laura as happy and content with her life, their marriage, and her career. Yet Ethan felt no comfort reading about their seemingly perfect past, knowing where the story was headed. As he read on, dread filled him. By early September, he found an entry that caught his attention. Laura wrote about meeting her new teaching assistant, Vaughn, which made Ethan pause. He reread the passage twice, trying to understand its significance. September 8th. My new assistant, Vaughn, came into my office today. He's a bit taller than me, with black hair, dark eyes, and a scruffy beard. He reminds me of a movie star. He left me a printout of his grades and seems quite qualified. Ethan continued reading, searching for more mentions of Derek. The next couple of entries were routine, focused on her classes and workload. She seemed content overall, though slightly nervous about managing a large class of over 100 students. Still, something about that initial mention of Derek nagged at him, and he felt compelled to keep reading. September 15th. Derek has been helping with my large class, answering students' questions while I prepare lectures. My female students seem quite enthusiastic about him. Some even said he looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. That's probably why he seemed familiar. Ethan continued reading, noting that Vaughn was being mentioned more frequently. September 20th. Classes are improving, though a few students have dropped out, probably finding the material too difficult. During my lectures, Derek sits in the front row and watches me intently. Maybe I should give him more work to keep him occupied. September 24th. I had some free time today and worked on a reading assignment with Derek. We made great progress, copying materials and selecting articles. I also started thinking about discussing the idea of having children with Ethan, something we've never seriously talked about before. As Ethan read on, Laura's entries reflected her excitement about the possibility of starting a family. By the end of September, she wrote about Ethan agreeing to wait until after the school year to begin trying for a baby. October 8th. I'm so excited. Ethan and I have decided to have children, and I'll stop taking the pill after the spring semester. I told Derek, and he was genuinely happy for us. He hugged me tightly, which caught me off guard. I had to remind him that the door was open before gently pushing him away. Ethan clenched his jaw. Derek's behavior was beginning to cross lines. October 10th. Derek came to my office today, and I didn't hear him come in until he closed and locked the door behind him. He smiled and said, "Now no one can see us." I told him to unlock the door, which he did, but it left me uneasy about his intentions. October 11th. Derek apologized for locking the door, and I told him it was fine. When I asked why he was so interested in me, he said he prefers mature women to girls his age. I reminded him I'm married, though I admit I was flattered. Ethan read that line twice, feeling both frustrated and betrayed. October 13th. I expected Derek to visit today, but he didn't. Oddly enough, I felt disappointed. October 16th. Today, I finally asked Derek why he's attracted to older women. He revealed that his first sexual experience was with a 40-year-old widow and that he finds women his age immature. During our conversation, he hugged me, and I let him. Then, unexpectedly, he kissed me before leaving. I realize I should have stopped him, but I didn't, and now I can't stop thinking about it. Ethan was alarmed by how passive Laura had become in dealing with Derek. Grabbing another soda, he braced himself to continue reading. October 20th. Late this afternoon, Derek showed up as I was leaving my office. When I told him I wasn't busy, he locked the door behind him again. He said he'd been thinking about me constantly and asked for a birthday kiss. I gave in, thinking it would make him leave, but now I regret it. I even apologized for not having a card, but he just laughed, saying his birthday was in July. I should have been angry at his trick, but I wasn't. I need to be more careful around him. For a while, the next few entries didn't mention Derek. Laura focused on grading exams and essays, and Ethan found it odd that Derek wasn't helping with those tasks anymore. He wondered if something had changed, but the diary didn't offer any explanations. October 30th. For the first time, I don't know how to describe my day. I'm scared Ethan will see right through me when he gets home. It started when Derek came into my office this afternoon. I was reading and didn't notice him enter until I heard the door lock. He took my hands, pulled me from my chair, and started kissing me before I could react. I'm ashamed I didn't stop it. He smiled afterward and said, "Don't try to tell me you didn't like it." I didn't respond, and he said, "I knew it." I told him to leave, and he just smiled and said he'd see me tomorrow. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the entry over and over. His anger was boiling over. Derek had crossed far too many boundaries, and Ethan couldn't understand why Laura hadn't done more to stop it. Worse, she admitted she had been thinking about Derek, which fueled Ethan's growing rage. November 2nd. I think I've finally stopped worrying about Ethan figuring out what happened. That first evening after the kiss was the hardest. Every time he looked at me, I felt sure he could see right through me. When he asked if something was bothering me, I denied it, and he believed me. I realized then how easy it is to hide things from him. I hope I never have to do this again. Ethan clenched his fists. The idea that Laura had hidden such a serious situation from him so easily made his stomach turn. November 6th. It's been a few days since I last saw Derek alone. Ethan sat back, staring at the diary in disbelief. He was furious, at Derek for his predatory behavior and at Laura for allowing it to escalate. He knew he needed to keep reading to find out how this had all unfolded, but every entry made it harder to contain his anger. November 8th. Derek came into my office today while students were present. As he left, he blew me a kiss and grinned. I don't think anyone noticed, but I wish he'd be more discreet. I also received an invitation to seminars in Columbus after the new year. I ordered more information. November 9th. Yesterday was difficult. I'm unhappy with both Derek's behavior and my own, and I'm worried about where this is headed. This morning, Derek came into my office quietly and ignored my request to unlock the door. He lifted me from my chair, and though I resisted at first, I eventually gave in. What started as a kiss became more, and I lost control. Afterward, I was upset and ran to the bathroom, wondering how angry Ethan would be if he knew. Derek followed, unapologetic, and said he hoped we could do it again. I couldn't bring myself to say no. Strangely, I acted normal around Ethan when he got home. We made love, and it felt good. Maybe I was trying to prove something to myself. Ethan felt another surge of anger as he read this entry. Things had escalated further than he imagined. He continued reading, noticing that Laura didn't mention Derek again for a few days as she focused on work. November 17th. I don't know what's wrong with me. Derek has a power over me that I didn't expect. I told him today that what happened before was wrong, reminding him I'm married and that my career is at risk. He just smiled and asked if I wanted him to lock the door or if he should do it himself. I froze, and he locked it. I'm torn. I know this needs to stop, but I don't feel we've done anything truly terrible yet. I hope I can keep this secret from Ethan. No one can see into my office, so I should be safe. This happened just an hour ago, and I still feel euphoric. I hope I can pull myself together before Ethan gets home. Ethan clenched his fists, feeling betrayed. It was clear Laura had crossed a line she couldn't undo. He checked the time. It was already 2 a.m., but he couldn't stop. Before continuing, he called his office to take the next day off. He knew his life had changed forever. Where there was once love and trust, there was now only cold emptiness and growing rage. He took a break to use the bathroom, grabbed another soda, and returned to the kitchen. His mind raced as he tried to process everything. November 22nd, Derek came to my office today, but I kept my desk between us. He didn't try to lock the door or make any advances. I think he sensed my resolve to end this. I hope I can keep it up. For the next few days, Derek wasn't mentioned. Laura seemed optimistic as the semester neared its end. November 23rd. I told Ethan about the workshops, and he was supportive, even offering to take time off and join me. I need to think about it. There's plenty to do when I'm not in seminars. Ethan frowned. He knew Laura's decision to attend alone had changed sometime between late November and mid-December, which only deepened his suspicions. November 25th, Derek stopped me in the hallway today and asked if he could visit our house. I told him no, especially when he brought up Ethan's night shifts. He then suggested I visit him at the house he shares with other students, but I refused. He left me his number in case I changed my mind. I mentioned the seminars, and he seemed very interested, even though they're for teachers only. November 30th. I feel lost. Yesterday was too difficult to write about, and I barely slept. Ethan noticed something was wrong, but I denied it, and he didn't push. I've been fantasizing about Derek, even though I don't have feelings for him. Today, when he came to my office, he helped me finish exam prep. Afterward, he locked the door, and I couldn't stop him. Once it was over, I ran to the bathroom and cried. How did I let this happen? Maybe I should see a therapist. Ethan paused, his anger intensifying. He saw Laura's regret, but it didn't excuse her actions. The more he read, the more he felt like a stranger to the woman he thought he knew. December 1st, Derek stopped by to say goodbye before flying home for the holidays. He asked if I wanted him to return early and join me at the seminar. I told him I hadn't decided yet. He said he'd call me in a few days. December 8th, I told Ethan I wanted him to stay home while I attended the seminar, suggesting we take a spring break cruise instead. He wasn't thrilled, but he eventually agreed. I feel terrible lying to him. I haven't decided if I'll take Derek with me, but I'm thinking about it. I don't love him. I just see him as a sexual partner. Spending time with him without rushing might be nice, especially since he's experienced. Ethan sat in stunned silence. This final entry shattered him. Laura wasn't just lying. She was actively planning to bring Derek with her on the trip she had insisted on taking alone. Ethan's hands trembled as he closed the diary, overwhelmed by a mix of betrayal, anger, and confusion. He couldn't decide whether to confront her immediately or wait until she returned. All he knew was that their relationship and his trust in her would never be the same. December 12th, Derek called this morning, still eager to go to Columbus with me. He suggested we book adjoining rooms and pretend he's my brother to avoid suspicion. He even offered to pay for my room. Now, I need to decide if I'm truly ready to cheat on Ethan. December 14th, Derek called again today. He tried to reach me yesterday, but I wasn't in the office. I went ahead and reserved rooms 412 and 414, as he suggested. I felt awful doing it. He'll pay for room 414 with his Visa card. He seems excited, though I'm not exactly thrilled. Still, part of me is looking forward to it. Derek will be leaving after the spring semester, so I hope I won't be tempted to see him again after our 3 nights together. I don't know why Derek has this effect on me. Many attractive men have shown interest before, but I never gave in. Somehow, he just knows how to push all the right buttons. God, I hope Ethan never finds out. It would destroy him. The rest of December's entries barely mentioned Derek. Only once did Laura write about him calling her at home. December 28th, Derek called me yesterday while Ethan was at work. I was shocked to hear his voice, but relieved Ethan wasn't there. He said he was prepared to have a man answer and would have asked for Veronica if that happened. He just wanted to confirm I was still going to Columbus so he could make plans. I told him yes, and he got excited. I tried to stay calm, but deep down, I felt anxious. I hope this trip helps me move past whatever this is. Before Ethan, I never stayed with the same man for more than 2 nights in a row. Maybe that's why I agreed to Derek's idea. I just pray this trip gives me closure. Ethan checked the clock. It was nearly 5 a.m. He knew the next entry would be the one he'd already read when he first opened the diary. Though exhausted, he was determined to finish Laura's final journal before deciding what to do. Even if she had never cheated before Derek, he needed to know if there were others he should direct his anger toward. He made some coffee and prepared himself for the last pages. January 3rd, tomorrow's the big day. 3 days of workshops and 3 nights with Derek. I'll pick him up before we leave and drop him off afterward. Thank God Ethan didn't push to join me. If he had, I wouldn't have known what to say. He even found a map online to help me navigate. I looked up the mall near the Sheraton, and there's a Victoria's Secret. I might buy some sexy outfits for Derek and then wash them before wearing them for Ethan. It feels wrong, but he'll never know. I can't believe I'm actually excited about this trip. I wonder if Derek expects something new, something Ethan and I haven't tried. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with that. It might make Ethan suspicious later. Maybe I'll save any new ideas for our cruise and pretend I just got adventurous. I've started packing, and I hope Ethan doesn't notice anything unusual. After rereading my thoughts, I'm questioning whether I can go through with this. What happened in my office was spontaneous, but this trip is planned. I don't have the same excuse. I could still back out, pay for Derek's room, and cover his travel expenses. Ethan closed the 7th journal and sipped his coffee, reflecting on the past 9 hours. He now knew his marriage was over. Even if Laura backed out of the trip at the last minute, he would never trust her again. Forgiveness felt impossible. The love he once felt was rapidly fading, replaced by cold bitterness toward Laura and growing hatred for Derek. By noon, Ethan got up from his desk and picked up the cordless phone. He had a decision to make, and he wasn't going to let emotions cloud his judgment. He dialed a number he had looked up earlier. Pearsall Investigations. How can I help you? The woman's professional tone put Ethan at ease. Do you handle divorce cases? Ethan wasn't sure how else to phrase his request, but he figured that was the best place to start. If you mean gathering evidence of infidelity, yes. Would you like to speak with a detective? Yes, that's exactly what I need, Ethan said. After a brief hold, a man's voice came on the line. Mark Pearson speaking. You're looking for evidence for a divorce? How can I help? Ethan explained the situation, feeling oddly comfortable as he laid out the details. I believe my wife is cheating on me. She's staying at the Sheraton near the airport with a man. I need photographic proof and want to know how much it will cost. Sheraton Hotels, got it. Is this happening now, or are we planning ahead? She's already there. She'll be staying until Saturday morning. She's in room 412, and the man's in 414. They arrived yesterday, but I didn't decide to do anything until this morning. She's supposed to be attending seminars, and he's just tagging along. Mark chuckled slightly at the unintentional pun before responding. All right, I'll need a few more details, and then we can discuss the type of surveillance you want. Can you provide their names and descriptions? Ethan described Laura and offered to email a photo, though he preferred to get things moving quickly. He also gave Derek's name and a rough description from Laura's diary. This sounds straightforward, Mr. Carter. We can set up cameras in both rooms today and leave them until they check out. It's quick work. I have a contact at the Sheraton who can get us access to their rooms for a fixed fee per entry. If all you want is photographic evidence, it'll cost $800. You mentioned cameras. Would it be cheaper if we just used one? I only need proof they were together. We'd still need cameras in both rooms since we don't know which one they'll use. The price is fair considering the equipment, setup, and paying the maintenance staff to let us in twice, once to install and once to remove the cameras. Sorry, I didn't think about that. I've never done this before. No worries. We'll get you what you need. Ethan agreed to proceed, knowing he needed definitive proof before confronting Laura. His decision had been made. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about preparing for what came next. Do you need payment up front? I can pay by credit card through your site, Ethan offered. That works. Use case number 1N372A when filling out the form. This helps our accounting. Once payment is confirmed, I'll install the cameras and prepare a DVD with the footage. I'll also need your name and address for shipping, Pearson explained. Could you hold on to the DVD until I contact you? Right now, I only need photos that confirm they met. Nothing explicit. Just clear evidence of the affair. I'll print them myself? Sure, Mr. Carter. I'll take stills from the video and email them to you. The DVD will remain on file until you request it. Ethan provided his phone number and processed the payment while still on the call. Pearson confirmed receipt and assured Ethan they would start installing the cameras immediately. Relieved, Ethan finally surrendered to his exhaustion and fell asleep on the sofa. He woke in the late afternoon, feeling somewhat rested but hungry. After eating leftover pizza, he began reading Laura's first diary. This time, he sped through the entries, not lingering on details. Just as he finished the first journal, Laura called around 10 p.m. Their conversation felt strangely normal, both carefully hiding their secrets. After the call, Ethan realized that just as he was concealing his plans, Laura was likely doing the same. He wondered if life would ever feel normal again. Before starting the second diary, Ethan reviewed his plans for Friday. He needed to visit the bank and wrap up financial matters. He had already quit his job at Harris Electric and planned to collect his final paycheck the next day. By 1 a.m., he had finished the second diary, though it took longer as his mind kept drifting to what might be happening at the Sheraton. Exhausted, he decided to sleep on the couch, not wanting to lie in the bed he shared with Laura. Surprisingly, Ethan slept well and woke around 7 a.m. feeling rested. He had a quick breakfast before resuming his reading. By midday, he had finished the third and fourth diaries. Setting the journals aside, he focused on his to-do list. First, he drove to Harris Electric to collect his last paycheck and clear out his locker. Leo Harris, his boss, tried persuading him to stay, but Ethan explained he was dealing with personal issues. After a brief conversation, Leo wished him luck and told him to reach out if he ever wanted to return. Next, Ethan went to the bank and withdrew over $20,000 from their joint and personal accounts, the maximum allowed without requiring Laura's signature. He figured this would cover his immediate expenses. Returning home around 4 p.m., Ethan noticed a message on his answering machine from Pearson Investigations. He called back immediately. Pearson Investigations, Pearson speaking. How can I help? This is Ethan Carter. I'm returning your call. Were you able to install the cameras and get any results? Yes, Mr. Carter. We installed the cameras yesterday afternoon and captured footage around noon today. Since both rooms were empty when we arrived, it went smoothly, Pearson explained. Ethan hesitated before asking, was there anything on the tape? Your suspicions have been confirmed. We have all the evidence you need for a divorce. They spent the night together in your wife's room. I've transferred the footage to a DVD, which is ready for pickup whenever you want. I also have 3 stills from the video prepared to email, if you still need them. Ethan felt tears well up unexpectedly. Despite everything he had read, seeing the photos made it painfully real. Yes, please email the photos. Thank you, Mr. Pearson. With everything paid in full, our business is complete, Pearson confirmed. Are you okay? You sound different from yesterday. These situations are emotional, and I'm a bit concerned. Ethan, keeping his emotions in check, replied with a slight edge in his voice, I'm fine. Thank you. I'll reach out if I need anything else. My lawyer might need the DVD if I pursue divorce for infidelity, so please hold on to it for now. Understood. We'll keep it on file for a year unless you instruct otherwise. One more thing, therapy can help in situations like this. A good therapist can guide you through the emotional toll, Pearson added kindly. Don't worry about me, Mr. Pearson. I know what I need to do. Thanks for your help. Ethan ended the call before Pearson could say more. His face remained expressionless as he sat in the kitchen, processing the situation. A notification beeped from his computer, signaling a new email. He opened the message from Pearson Investigations and printed the 3 attached photos on 8 by 10 paper. None of the photos were explicit, as he had requested, but they were undeniable proof of Laura's infidelity. After staring at them for a moment, he placed them in a brown envelope on the kitchen table. Ethan returned to his chair, where he had spent most of the past 2 days, and picked up Laura's 5th diary. By midnight, he had finished the last 2 volumes. Reflecting on all 6 journals, Ethan realized that, for the most part, Laura had lived up to his expectations of her, until now. What puzzled him most was why, after years of loyalty and commitment, she had allowed herself to fall into this affair. By morning, Ethan's mind was clearer. He wasn't going to confront Laura in a rage. He would be calm, collected, and strategic. The evidence in his possession gave him control, and he intended to use it wisely. There were few surprises in Laura's diaries, and no signs that she had ever considered betraying Ethan before Derek. He uncovered small secrets, which helped him understand past situations better, her insecurities, lack of confidence, and occasional doubts. What stood out most was the clear depth of her love for him, making her actions with Derek even more bewildering. The real shock came when Ethan discovered that their meeting at the birthday party years ago hadn't been accidental. Laura had asked for him to be invited when she learned the host knew him. That small piece of information lingered in his mind as he continued reading, feeling both touched and confused. Engrossed in the diaries, Ethan lost track of time and didn't notice Laura hadn't called. Hunger eventually pulled him from his thoughts, and he made himself a sandwich and a drink. However, dark images of Laura and Derek from the previous days haunted him, making it difficult to focus on anything else. His resolve to follow through with his plan only grew stronger. Whether it was the late-night meal or the disturbing thoughts, Ethan slept fitfully. By 7 a.m., tired of trying to rest, he gave up and began the day he had meticulously prepared for. At 8:30 a.m., he called his brother Daniel, his only close relative. Though they weren't on bad terms, they rarely saw each other outside of holiday gatherings. Daniel seemed surprised by the sudden visit, but fortunately, his family had no plans for the morning. Ethan arrived a little after 10 a.m. and, knowing the kids would be eager to return to their activities, quickly gathered them in the kitchen. He handed each child a $100 bill as a gift for their upcoming Disneyland trip. Thrilled, the kids hugged him in thanks. "You didn't have to do that, Ethan, but it sure made their day," Daniel said with a smile. "What's going on? Did you win the lottery?" Ethan forced a small smile. "No, nothing like that. Just felt like being generous." Over coffee, they caught up. When Grace, Daniel's wife, mentioned Laura and Ethan's plans to start a family, Ethan paused. "She told you about that, huh? Women sure do talk about everything," he said with a strained chuckle. Before Grace could respond, Ethan added, "It's hard to say how things will turn out. A lot can get in the way of those plans." He quickly shifted the conversation, asking Daniel about work. A few minutes later, Ethan stood to leave. "In case I don't see you until next Christmas, I hope everything goes well," he said, shaking his brother's hand and giving Grace a brief hug. "Take care." As he walked to his car, Daniel turned to Grace. "I wonder what that was about." He seemed to have something on his mind, but didn't want to talk about it. Grace shrugged. "He's probably just passing time until Laura gets back from that course. She mentioned she'd be gone until evening." They returned to their day, but Ethan drove away with a heavy heart, knowing he had taken another step toward ending his marriage. Just before 6 p.m., Laura returned home, surprised to find Ethan's car missing. The silence of the house caught her off guard. She had expected him to be waiting for her. Although disappointed, she welcomed the time alone to unpack and do laundry. She also planned to take another shower, still uneasy about whether her morning shower had fully erased all traces of Derek. As she walked through the kitchen, she noticed a note pinned down by a salt shaker. "Laura, Leo called this morning needing help at the Ville Center. I agreed to step in as a senior foreman. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon." Ethan, annoyed by his absence but relieved to have time alone, she placed the note on the counter and carried her suitcase upstairs. She began sorting her clothes for the laundry, planning to take a long, hot bath afterward. As she passed the dresser, she noticed her diary sitting where she had left it, alongside her emergency bag. Relieved that it appeared untouched, she thought about updating it during the trip but hadn't gotten around to it. After starting the laundry, Laura made herself a sandwich and soup. While eating, she tried calling Ethan using speed dial but heard the phone ringing from a basket on the counter. "Great, how can I reach you now?" she muttered, annoyed. Returning to the kitchen table, she retrieved her diary, unlocked it with the small brass key from her wallet, and began writing. January 7th. Dear Diary, the most intense 4 days of my life are over, and I need to capture everything. Some of it won't be easy to write, but it's necessary. When I picked Derek up, it was clear he was eager for the trip. He kept trying to touch me during the drive, which irritated me until we got on the highway. As we drove further, I relaxed and began to enjoy his attention. When we arrived, we stopped at the mall before heading to the Sheraton. While he went to the pharmacy, I went to Victoria's Secret. He joined me before I could finish shopping and made several suggestions. I bought one set he liked and 2 I chose. Ethan's note and absence didn't trouble Laura much. She was more focused on recording her memories of the trip while they were still fresh. Little did she know, Ethan's plan was already unfolding. The lingerie set Derek picked out was tacky. After wearing it Wednesday night, I threw it in the trash before we checked out. I also discarded 2 other sets. I didn't want anything to remind me of those nights. I know I can't erase all the memories, but I'll try. Laura continued writing in her diary, her emotions growing as she reflected on the past few days. She noted how her feelings for Derek had changed and how thoughts of Ethan had begun to dominate her mind. By Friday morning, she had told Derek, through a locked door, not to come to her room again. She felt relieved when she saw him with another woman later that day, knowing she wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. Laura also started planning how to make amends with Ethan. After finishing her diary entry, she placed the pin on the table as a bookmark and went upstairs to prepare a bath. She brought a cordless phone with her, just in case Ethan called. Once the bath was ready, she added bath oil, lit a few candles, and eased herself into the warm water, trying to relax. Though she almost fell asleep, a sudden sense of being watched jolted her awake. She glanced toward the bedroom but saw nothing, dismissing it as her imagination. After soaking for an hour, Laura felt refreshed. She went back to the kitchen, transferred the laundry to the dryer, and decided to reread her diary entry. She noticed her pin on the counter near the wicker basket, retrieved it, and sat down to read. On Sunday morning, Laura woke determined to start fresh. She cleaned the house, showered, and dressed in an outfit she knew Ethan liked. By noon, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, a roast beef cooking in the oven. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. To her surprise, two large men stood outside. One was a young uniformed officer, his hand resting on his holstered gun, and the other was an older man in a suit holding out a badge. "I'm Detective Morgan, and this is Officer Hayes. We're with the Springfield Police Department. We're looking for Ethan Carter. Is he home?" Laura, relieved they weren't there for her, quickly replied, "Ethan's at work. I was worried something had happened when I saw you. I'm his wife. Maybe I can help?" The two men exchanged glances before Morgan said, "Maybe we should come in. It's chilly out here." "Of course, come in," Laura said, leading them to the kitchen. "Why are you looking for Ethan? He's never been in trouble." "We received a homicide report this morning. The call was traced to your husband's phone. We're working with his carrier to determine his location at the time of the call." Laura's initial relief faded. "There must be a mistake. I tried calling Ethan last night, and his phone was here, in that basket." She pointed toward the wicker basket on the counter. Morgan walked over, checked the basket, and returned empty-handed. "I don't see a phone, Mrs. Carter. Are you sure you aren't confusing it with another day?" Laura's face turned pale as she realized the basket was indeed empty. Frantically, she approached the counter and looked around, though it was clear there was nothing else there. "I don't understand. His phone was right here last night when I tried calling him." "Well, I can't explain why it's missing, but the call traced to your husband's phone was definitely made from it," Morgan said, jotting down notes in his notebook. "Does your husband know a Mr. Derek Vaughn?" At the mention of Derek's name, Laura's face went pale and her eyes widened. "I know Derek Vaughn, but Ethan doesn't. Derek was my teaching assistant last semester." The detective and officer exchanged another glance before Morgan asked, "So there's no reason your husband would have an issue with Mr. Vaughn? You're sure he didn't know him?" Laura looked increasingly panicked. "No, Ethan never met Derek." Morgan made another note before delivering a shocking statement. "Well, your husband seemed to know Mr. Vaughn well enough to report his homicide." Laura was so stunned by the statement that she sank into a chair, her face filled with disbelief. "Derek is dead," she whispered. "He was on the trip with me. I dropped him off at his house around 5:30 last night. How could he be dead?" Laura whispered, visibly shaken. Detective Morgan sat across from her, studying her reaction before asking, "What was your relationship with Mr. Vaughn? Could it have given your husband a reason to eliminate him?" Laura's face paled. "Derek was just an older student who worked as my teaching assistant. Ethan had no reason to hurt him." Though her words denied any motive, her unsteady tone betrayed her unease. Morgan let the uncomfortable silence linger for nearly 30 seconds before continuing. "When we arrived at the address your husband provided, we found evidence that Mr. Vaughn had been attacked in the hallway of his home. There was a travel bag and signs of a struggle. The estimated time of death was between 6 and 8 p.m. yesterday." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she listened to the grim details. "Ethan would never do something like that. He's not violent," she insisted, her voice now trembling with anger more than fear. Morgan checked his notes. "According to state records, your husband is licensed to carry a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. One of the bullets found at the scene matches a .25 caliber round. Motive remains a key question. He pulled 3 photocopies from his briefcase and placed them on the table. These photos were found near Mr. Vaughn's body. Their placement suggests that your husband showed them to him before he was killed. I believe you haven't been entirely truthful about your relationship with Derek or your husband's knowledge of it. Laura picked up the photos and gasped. Her hands trembled as she stared at images of herself and Derek together, proof of her affair. No, Ethan couldn't have known, she murmured through tears. Before Morgan could continue, his cell phone rang. He answered briefly, jotting down notes as he listened. Laura sat silently, crying into her hands. After ending the call, Morgan looked at her with a serious expression. Your husband's phone was traced to Windsor, Ontario. Local police found it, along with his credit cards and a .25 caliber pistol, in a trash bin in a Walmart parking lot. His car's license plates were also found in the bin. There was no sign of your husband or his vehicle, but it appears he may have stolen a license plate to blend in with traffic. Laura's tears flowed harder. She could barely process what she was hearing. Morgan watched her quietly for a moment before placing another photocopy in front of her. It showed a small brass key next to a ruler. This key was found at the scene. We don't know what it unlocks. Do you recognize it? Laura stared at the photo, her eyes widening in realization. She grabbed her wallet, pulled out the key to her diary, and compared it to the photo. They were identical. At that moment, she completely broke down, sinking into her chair. Diary. Ethan, she managed to whisper. Morgan and Hayes stayed with her for another 15 minutes until she calmed down enough to call her sister. Once her sister confirmed she was on her way, the detectives prepared to leave. As they walked to their car, Hayes asked, "Do you think he'll be caught soon?" Morgan shrugged. "Depends on how well he can stay hidden. He hasn't committed any crimes in Canada, so local police might not prioritize finding him. If he keeps a low profile, the longer he's free, the harder it'll be to catch him. If he's still at large in 6 months, we might have to involve national media. Some of those most wanted shows are pretty effective." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "What do you think about her story with the phone? She seemed genuinely convinced it was here last night." "I believe her. She wasn't lying or confused," Morgan replied. "I suspect Ethan returned home briefly, probably saw the phone, and decided to take it." Hayes frowned. "But if he came home, why wouldn't he let her know he was there? Why just grab the phone and leave?" Morgan stopped and turned toward the younger officer. "Think about it. Ethan Carter had just killed her lover. If he returned home, it wasn't just to retrieve his phone. The only reason I can imagine him coming back was to eliminate her too, and maybe himself." Hayes looked stunned. "You really think he came back to kill her?" "I don't know what changed his mind, but I don't believe for a second he just came back for the phone," Morgan said flatly. Hayes nodded slowly, absorbing the grim theory. "I wonder if she'll realize how close she came to dying. How do you think she'll cope with that?" Morgan sighed. "Hard to say. People react in all kinds of ways to something like this. But eventually, she'll figure it out." They got into their car and drove off, leaving Laura alone with the weight of what had just been revealed.